These ideas are really powerful. And there's powerful ideas that are all around us all the time. We're overwhelmed with powerful ideas. But the whole point of this book is that it's when we embrace the limitations and be with what's right in front of us that things really begin to shift. So I want to invite you to really let these ideas move you. Let yourself be tender. Let yourself be touched. Because your life can change. This very moment. It's in the daily, ordinary moments that we forget that freedom is always right here. And so I just want to really encourage you to sink in, to give yourself some time. If you'd like to be here, right, be here. If you don't want to be here, that's okay. I'd love for you to be here. But really let yourself kind of just settle in, sink in. So we'll get started here. We are reading chapter 3, Facing Finitude in 4,000 Weeks, Time Managed for Mortals. Today, there's a couple big themes that we're going to be exploring. And the first is that we don't really get a choice in this life of what we inherit. We get thrown into the water of existence, the water of time, as Heidegger says. And our choice, rather, is whether to say yes or to say no to it. And so that's why the whole first part of this book is about choosing to choose. The other theme that I kind of want to play with throughout this is grief. That we are actually empowered by grief. I think grief can kind of feel like a bad word because it hurts. But grief is something that occurs, it's a type of alchemy where when we feel through grief, we actually find deeper connection with ourselves. We find deeper connection with that which is lost. We get permission to live here fully in this reality. And we come out on the other side with an integration. We aren't left disconnected, but rather we are connected to that which we've lost. And so grief actually permits us to feel our limitations. One of the challenges too with our limited nature is the less you allow yourself to recognize your own limited nature, the less you're going to allow yourself to recognize other people's limitations, which is incredibly difficult because in order to live with anybody at all, it means dealing and working with their limitations. So it's called a parallel process there of the way that we relate to ourselves parallels the way that we relate to other people. And then we're going to talk about the privilege to choose. That so often, especially when we're framing things in this way, the realization that there's only 4,000 weeks in a lifetime, we can become overwhelmed, feeling like something's taken away from us. When the reality is that having any time at all, having any life at all is a real gift. So let's get started here in Facing Finitude. He talks about Heidegger. And he says that everyday language reflects our everyday way of seeing. But Heidegger wants to slip his fingernails under the most basic elements of existence. The things that we barely notice because they're so familiar. And that means using unfamiliar terms. There's a quote that's worth living by. One of the philosophers, Aristotle, Socrates, I don't know, says, the unexamined life is not worth living. It's so easy to live in our lives on autopilot and not realize that we are just acting out of hurts. We're acting out of defenses. We're acting out of a time where we're frozen. It's not really here, it's really there. It's about times that when we got hurt. And that's one of the other themes that I really want to explore here today, is the theme that we are wounded in our relationship to time. That when we get hurt, we become stuck in those places of hurt. Because we're not able to face that hurt and process that hurt, there's parts of us that get left there, that pain gets pushed away, it gets cut off, it gets shoved into the corner. And then another part of us that's not much older, they have to take on the job of keeping that pain away. And so one of the things that becomes wounded is our very relationship for time. We're not living here. We're living stuck between pain and hurt and defenses. And so one of the things that comes as we just recognize the human situation, of our finitude, as Heidegger teaches us, is that we're never going to get out of this alive. We're really taking life as it is. And we can either battle and fight in war against the way life is, or we can work with it and flow like water. And so Heidegger explores, it's called, in German, it's called Geworfenheit. Geworfenheit means thrownness, the fact that we are all just thrown into existence. We don't get to choose. We don't get to make really, that's it. We don't get to choose. We are thrown into reality. And he says so many of the philosophers look at the way things are, but we've forgotten to be amazed that things are in the first place. That a world is worlding all around us, as Heidegger puts it. This fact, the fact that there is being to begin with, is the brute reality on which all of us ought to be constantly stubbing our toes. But instead, it's almost always passing us by. There's this theme throughout this chapter, and what I want to really welcome you into in this moment is awe. Awe and wonder. We're so used to existence that we take it for granted because it's all we've ever known. But it's a miracle to be here at all. It's a miracle that our bodies are able to maintain the right temperature, to pump blood through all our veins. That breath is always here with us. And this is one of my favorite ways to reflect on breath. So often I hear from my clients, people saying like, nobody's there for me, nobody's taking care of me, I have to do it on my own. And I feel such a deep tenderness when reflecting on my breath, because I can turn to my breath, I can look to my breath, and there it is, here it is. And you can notice this right now, that your breath, right here, right now, is holding you. It's taking care of you. It's carrying you from one moment to the next. And this awe is really fundamental. Later on, Berkman will say that this is part of the solution that he's found to really living in remembrance of our death, to remember just how crazy it is for anything to exist at all. How wild it is that all this just keeps spontaneously happening. And then secondly, to remember what a miracle it is that we get a short period of it. It's so easy for us to become privileged about our time, to come to feel like our time is being taken away from us, like it's unfair. But he says, why do we feel like we have so little of 4,000 weeks? What if instead, rather, we reflect on the fact that we get any time at all? And so there's a really beautiful reality if we can attend ourselves to be present to it, that we exist at all. And I find that reality really tenderly connects with the breath. So Heidegger talks about how bound up we are in time. His answer is that our being is totally, utterly bound up with our finite time. It's so bound up, in fact, that the two are synonymous. To be, for human, is above all to exist temporally, in the stretch between birth and death, certain that the end will come, yet unable to know when. We tend to speak about having a limited amount of time. But it makes more sense from Heidegger's strange perspective to say that we are a limited amount of time. That's how completely time defines us. Heidegger calls this our finitude. Our limited time isn't just one of the various things that we have to cope with. Rather, it's the one thing that defines us as humans before we start coping with anything at all. Before I can ask a single question about what I should do with my time, I find myself already thrown into time, into this particular moment, with my particular life story, which has made me who I am, and which I can never get out from under. There's a psychotherapist and priest called Von Kamm, and he says, we all have a choice in life. We can either have a fundamental yes to reality, where we take life on its terms, or a fundamental no, where we try to control life and get it to be what we need it to be. We don't get to choose the terms of life. We don't get to choose the rules of the game of this world that we've been thrown into. We can either try to fight the world that we've been given, or we can learn to participate in it. We're all going to die. That's just the facts. But the longer we reject and ignore and push away our death, the longer we are fighting against reality in an unending battle. When we can't accept our own death, we can't accept our limitations. When we can't accept our limitations, we can't accept other people's limitations. And so relationships, work, meaning it's all quite miserable. So he talks that our lives are very limited because we're thrown into this fact, this existence. But they're also limited in the forward direction because the decision to do anything at all automatically means sacrificing an infinite number of potential alternative paths. And here he talks about the word decide on page 60. To decide means to cut off, as in to cut off a limb, to prune a tree, to prune the branches. To decide means to let go of this option and embrace this. And to do that means saying no. We've lost the power of no. And I really believe this, that at least for me right now, the next 10 years of my life are going to be really the setup to the next 40. And the most important thing I can learn to do is say no. Any finite life, even the best one you could possibly imagine, is therefore a matter of ceaselessly waving goodbye to possibilities. The question about our limitedness is really, are we willing to confront it or not? As Berkman says on page 60, we must live out our lives to whatever extent we can in clear-eyed acknowledgement of our limitations, in the undiluted mode of existence that Heidegger calls being towards death, aware that this is it, that life is not a dress rehearsal, that every choice is a myriad sacrifice, that time is always already running out. Indeed, that it might run out today or tomorrow or next month. Now, this seems morbid, this fact that we're going to die. But what seems much more morbid is to ignore this fact and then to get to the very end and realize that we hadn't actually at all lived according to what was important. We often live in avoidance and denial. These are the options that we get. Fight against our limitations and be miserable, or embrace what we are fully. And embracing, here's the thing, embracing what we are fully means being limited. Limited is not a bad word. It's a boundary of experience and existence. We are boundary beings. We are time. We are temporal. We can't escape that. And in Getting Real on page 62, one of the authors talks about visiting with his family. And the thing that makes that special is the fact that it won't last forever. There's a a difficult, painful reflection here. If you want to really explore what matters, you can think, for example, perhaps of your relationship with family. If you think about your relationship with your parents, think about how many times you see your parents in a year. You can count that for yourself, how many times you see your parents in a year. And then I want to invite you to think about reasonably how many more years they may be alive. There's a limited amount of times we will see those that we love. But when we live in relationship, that in that being towards death, everything actually takes on vitality and meaning. And so the grief and the ability to grieve our own death, to think about the fact that one day we are going to be in a casket. One day we are going to become the earth. One day we will become the flowers that sprout up from where we were buried. When we live in relationship and an understanding of that, then all of a sudden, our lives, our moments, they're actually packed with meaning. It's not that confronting our death brings anxiety. It's that not confronting our death brings anxiety. And you're so habituated to not confronting your death that you become anxious when you think about it. But facing it is the only thing that will give your life meaning. Because we are limited. We are time-bound. And in a world of infinite potential, none of your decisions would mean anything at all. And so in this way, our limitedness is the grief of mortals, but the exhilaration of the gods. The Greek gods, they could do anything. And so it didn't matter what they did. They envied mortals whose choice mattered, who fell in love with this person, who chose to live this life. We are inundated by opportunity and potential. And so we are losing touch with what it means to be right here, right now. He talks about people who live in this way. They're living in denial of the fact that their time is limited. So when it comes to deciding how to use any given portion of that time, nothing can genuinely be at stake. It's by consciously confronting the certainty of death and what follows, that the certainty of death, that we finally become truly present. It pitches us into a more authentic mode of being. And so he talks about some authors who have this sense of what he calls bright sadness, stubborn gladness, or sober joy. And I really like that idea of sober joy. That in living in relationship to my death and my limitations, I'm not naive, but I don't have to lose joy either. And so one of the questions he asks at page 65 is, the question is whether we might attain some sense of this outlook of vitality without actually confronting death. And I think we can. One of the things that I like to do in the mornings after my workout is I lay down on the ground, and I usually spend 3 or 5 minutes, and I just think of the fact that everybody that I love, this sounds morbid to say, and I even hesitate to say it because I know people will be turned off by it. My wife will die. My little son, who's 2 years old, will die. My daughter, she's 1 year old, she will die. I will die. My parents will die. And I want to live with that reality rather to reject it. Because it puts into frame what really matters. And it puts into frame how I really want to live my life. The life of the mundane, of nothing mattering, that comes from not acknowledging our death. But if we can learn now to die well, if we can prepare to die well, we will live well. And if we don't prepare for our death, we will live poorly. One of the things he talks about here again is this remarkableness of life. there was an author David Watson, or Geoff Lynn, and his friend had passed away, David Watson. And he said, I found myself stuck in traffic, not clenching my fist at the agitation, but wondering, what would my friend have given to be caught in a traffic jam? Lai's focus was no longer exclusively on what he was doing in such moments, but that he was doing them at all. He realized our whole life is borrowed time. We have this existence, and one day we will pass away, we will fade away, we will become the earth that we walk on. It will give way to new life, and this is borrowed time. And so rather than looking at our limitedness as a negativity that we have to choose, we can look at it as a positive affirmation. To choose something is a positive commitment to spend a given portion of your time doing this instead of that. Actually, instead of an infinite number of that's. Because this right here is what you've decided counts. And this is the joy of missing out. We talk about the fear of missing out. But one of the things that I've been reflecting on, and I think I might make a meditation on this, is if you can imagine that you only had a year to live. If you can imagine that you only had one day to live, and then you were given a week. You thought you were going to die, and you were given a week. What a privilege that would be. What a gift that would be to receive. How awe-inspiring, how opening. And this is what we're given in each moment, in this moment. I really mean this, and I really believe this, and I hope you can hear it. This moment right here can change your life. Realizing that we're going to die is what equips us to live fully. And realizing that we're limited actually allows us to act with discernment when opportunities come up. It aligns us with our values, and our values say, who am I becoming along the way? What do I want my legacy to be? The material things, they will all fade away. But the impact that your life has relationally, emotionally on others, that will live on and be passed on for generations to come. And so everything can begin to shift when we start to grieve our own death. When we attend our own funeral. When we realize that we're not gods. And we don't get it all. We don't get to do it all. That's exactly what makes it worth it. That's exactly what makes it meaningful. If you pursue happiness by trying to fill your life with all exciting and fun activities, you will miss it. But if instead you can focus on living your values, there happiness, wellness emerges. So I hope you can give yourself permission to be limited. And I want to welcome the thoughts, reflections, questions from this chapter. From this chapter, from other thoughts, from the video here, kind of shift into our Q&A and reflection. Thoughts, questions, reflections on embracing our limitedness, embracing our finitude. How to live a meaningful life. That's really kind of what we're exploring here, is how do we live a meaningful life? How do we live a life of fullness? I think the only option is to learn how to grieve, how to learn to live in relationship to our limitedness. I'm very interested to hear what themes or questions are sticking out to you related to living in relationship to our death. Maybe just related to meaning in general. something that I've been struck by a lot lately is this deep realization, something that I've known, but it's felt more relevant, is that when we pursue happiness, we lose it. Because happiness is a derivative phenomenon. Happiness is something that comes as a result of living rather than something that can come from pursuing it directly. And so the more we try to grab onto happiness, the more we lose it. But the more we let go of happiness and instead align ourselves with values and live out that life of values, the more happiness finds us. You can't find happiness. You can find meaning. And when you find meaning, happiness flows through. So what other questions do you have about our limitations, about living meaningfully in relationship? Is this something that we can only realize once we are of a certain age? Or is an age-appropriate way to impart this onto children? Yeah, I personally don't think that there's a certain age that we have to learn this. I do think there's age-appropriate ways that we can share this with kids. I just think that it kind of comes naturally. So when death emerges in life and your children experience it, like this is the thing, we don't need to put death in front of anybody. It's all around us. But in terms of children, I think, when loved ones die, when cherished pets die, when kids will ask about death, we just talk to them about it. We just say, yeah, like we're gonna die. And then we console them, right? It'll be frightening for them. But the more we shield children from death, the more they will avoid death, the thought of it, and the less meaningful they'll live in their lives because they'll be constantly avoiding it. So one of the other things is that one of the ways that we can become frightened of our death and our mortality is when we experience constant criticism for our limitations. When criticism is incessant, we come to learn that limitations are a problem. And so if limitations are a problem, our ultimate limitation is a problem, which is the fact that we're going to die. So compassion for being human, the fact that like, hey, we all have faults and foibles, that's not an excuse or a permissiveness, but we can live in relationship to them, that brings deep meaning. So I do think that we can educate children along the way about our death. In my own experience, have I noticed making room for grief makes more room for genuine joy? Yeah, I would. I mean, and I think the example is just that when in the mornings, when I reflect on the fact that my children and my wife and myself and my family, we're all going to die one day, it could be today, I'm much more available to the mundane. The mundane is mundane because we have forgotten the fact of our limitations and our death. The mundane all of a sudden becomes exciting. This moment right here becomes exciting and invigorating when we remember that we don't get it forever. We don't know how long we'll get it. So that brings a great sense of joy to me. It's so interesting to realize that my aversion to choose, to collapse possibilities, is in fact a fear of dying. Yes. Yeah, our inability to make decisions and choose is deeply related to our inability to see our limitedness. There's a great analogy here is that, we are not fake flowers. We are real flowers. We are vibrant. We have life. We need water. And one day we will die. And that's okay. But no fake flowers can ever compete with a real flower. And that's okay. It's just really okay that we're limited. So would you say that death is meaningful? Would I say that death is meaningful? Absolutely. Death is incredibly meaningful. Our lives take on meaning in relationship to our death. Without our death, without our limitations, I'm not sure we would be able to have any meaning. There's a whole field of psychologists that believe that all of our psychological defenses come about because we are avoiding our death, because we're not able to face our death. But when we are able to live in relationship to limitations, we're able to live in relationship to ourselves. And this is the thing. We have faults and foibles. If you can't accept the fact that you have faults, you will not be able to accept the fact that other people have faults. And so you'll either be doing one of two things. You'll constantly find yourself blaming yourself in relationships, taking 100% of the blame, and seeing that person as perfect, which is not true. Or you'll blame them for everything and see yourself as perfect, which is not true. Or some isolation and vacillation of both. Blame isn't the answer, right? Accountability is different than blame. But blame leaves us stuck. And instead, rather, when we can recognize, oh, I'm limited, I can't do this perfectly, and I never could, well, then there's apology and forgiveness and repair. When we live in denial of our death, we live in a world of fantasy. And when we live in a world of fantasy, we idealize people and relationships, and then they don't live up to our idealizations, and then we attack the person for it or attack ourselves. You're just limited. That's the fact, and it's really okay. But when I can make friends with my limitation, when I can just say like, oh, my limitedness, it's just a part of me being human, well, then I can actually accept apologies from people. Then I can hear people and say, I'm sorry, I don't know why I said that. I shouldn't have said that. When they say, hey, I was really angry at you and I said that and it was hurtful, I can apologize. I can receive apologies. There is no perfect relationship. There's imperfect relationships with imperfect people. And we can either try to ignore those limitations or we are shackled by them. I would love to welcome other thoughts you have on our limitations, on the struggle with our limitations. I'm interested to hear what some of the most difficult limitations you all face are. I'm curious how you guys think about death. It's pretty common for us to be scared of death. If you feel afraid or live in fear of death, I'm curious what helps you with that too. What led me personally into this kind of work? So I'm a therapist, and what brought me into therapy is having a really hard time in life. So when I was young, I experienced a lot of depression, a lot of overwhelm. I had a really hard time wanting to be alive at all. And I had the experience with a therapist that was less than helpful. I remember just sitting across from this therapist, and I was probably in 5th or 6th grade. I just felt awful. Life was really hard. And I remember thinking, it's not right that I feel this shitty and you're so bad at your job. And so that was one of the things that I kind of committed to. Well, that was kind of the spark. And then when I was in high school, I had a class taught by a local community college on psychology, and I just loved it. It was super exciting. So it was that kind of classic story of being a wounded healer, of not wanting someone to experience what I experienced and not be helped. And then later on, it's really become now, it's because it's something that I just deeply, deeply enjoy. I love working with people, and I've come to learn that there's no emotions that I have to be afraid of at all. I don't feel afraid of emotions in myself. And so being able to sit with people and share that with them is incredibly powerful. So now it's just like something that I absolutely love doing. Yeah, there was another question here. Why some become nihilistic when contemplating death and others feel more alive? It's a really great question. I would really actually welcome you guys to see what you think. Why do you guys think that some people become nihilistic when contemplating death and others feel more alive? It's a wonderful question. I think part of it perhaps might be fear. I think that we become nihilistic because we are afraid of caring. When we're afraid of caring, it doesn't make sense to care about anything. But I think that nihilism is a deep distrust of anything. I think nihilism can come from wanting life to matter in this kind of ultimate sense, because it's afraid of caring right now. But life can matter right now because it is. And this is what all the existentialists say, or those that I've come across, is that our lives don't take on meaning from this big ultimate meaning. You find meaning right here and right now. So I think people become nihilistic, and this is kind of shooting from the hip. I would welcome you all to continue asking any questions here. I think people become nihilistic because of fear of caring and being disappointed. And what I've found is that grief heals our fear of disappointment. When we can, grief Grief heals our fear of disappointment. When we can learn to grieve, we no longer have to be afraid of being disappointed, because we can experience the emotional pain of disappointment and we can work through it. I think that grief is a kind of alchemy in which we transfer the relationship to that which was grieved. And by working through the grief and feeling the pain, we actually become more fully ourselves. We actually become more fully human. We become more fully here. And not only that, we don't leave the grieved behind, but we live with them in a different way. And so in grief, our relationship shifts from being a material present relationship to a spiritual relationship in which we live with them in our hearts, continuing onward. And when we learn to grieve, death, life, big things, little things, disappointment doesn't frighten us so much. But welcome other thoughts, other questions here, and then we'll be wrapping up here in a moment. I'm so glad to be with you all here today. I think of it like the world is a waiting room and the afterlife is the destination. Yeah. I think the danger with that thought is that when we only view this as the prelude to some eternal life, then that can make it really easy for us to ignore this life. There's a quote that I really like from, I think it's St. Catherine of Siena, and she says, "The earth is your ship and not your home." But I think it's really, really important that we commit to taking care of the ship that we've inherited, that we really commit to our lives now. I really do kind of believe in this idea that our life on earth right here, right now, can be heaven or hell. Depends how we see it. And sometimes our beliefs can get in the way of us really living fully right here. So thank you all for being here. Living the highest quality life in this life is life's priority. I think that's absolutely, I totally agree with that. Well, thank you all for being here. So I'm also running a process group, which is different than the book study, but it's a 12-week interpersonal process group where we practice being in the present moment. And so if you're somebody who you find yourself stuck in your head and you find yourself oftentimes in relationships either in stuck points, or you want to live more fully, or you've heard about being present, but you don't know how to actually do that, how to actually be present, that's what this group's about. So it's a 12-week process group. I lead it. It's 5 to 8 people. And we explore the here and now, living fully, immersing ourselves in the moment, exploring what are the fears that stop us from being present in the moment. Fears of rejection, fears of hurt, and helping you actually work through that. So if you're interested in that, please send me a DM, PP26. That's PP26 if you want to join my interpersonal process group. It's something I'm so excited to be sharing. It's really been a life changer for me as a participant in times past, so I'm glad to share it with you. So DM me PP26. But otherwise, thank you so much for being here. We'll pick up next Friday at 12:15, and we'll continue on. You're so welcome, and I'm grateful for your participation. So take good care and allow yourself to live with your limitations, my friends. Peace. Next week, we're going to be reading Becoming a Better Procrastinator, Chapter 4. And Becoming a Better Procrastinator, pages 71 to 88. Next week, we're going to be reading Chapter 4, Becoming a Better Procrastinator, pages 71 to 88 in the book Time Managed for Mortal, 4,000 Weeks